Welcome to the Flora Sage Podcast, a place where we help you create a life you're excited about. After last week's episode, I got several emails asking just how do we rewrite our stories. So today we're going to look at how to identify the stories that are impacting you the most and how to rewrite them. Now, before we get into that, I just want to look at why we tell stories. This actually dates back to the earliest of man, the oral history of things. Picture a bonfire with people sitting around it, or people sitting around just in a cave or wherever, listening to the lessons from the past. If you think about modern days, we sit around bonfires, we sing songs, we tell poems, we watch plays, we listen to ghost stories. Throughout our day, we listen to books on tape, we read bedtime stories to our children, and we listen to songs that tell and convey a story. These oral traditions help to shape our reality. They convey life lessons. They warn us of dangers from the past in hopes to avoid them in the future. Some of them make us feel better. Some of them make us feel panicked or full of anxiety. Most bring up emotions of some sort, and they activate things within us. Typically, they paint pictures of what is, what was, and what is to come. Now, there generally are two types of stories. The oldest form is to teach life lessons, to share history, to share consequence, so that others can be a witness to life's past events. We also share our stories hopefully so that others can witness our life. Many past and the oldest forms also deal with fantasy and play to help us escape our life for a time. Now, the second form of storytelling, and this is the newest form of storytelling, and this is an ego-based form of storytelling. It's to gossip and rehash and play the victim and wallow and all the things. You know that old saying, misery loves company? That is the newest form of storytelling. Simply because we don't live in a time where those oral traditions hold as much value. So that old part of our brain that craves that storytelling kind of energy uses it to gossip or talk about the news and talk about all the random things. Now, stories can also help us by showing us a better way to do things or a different way to approach life's situations. And it also helps us by helping us learn by hearing and not doing or experiencing that thing. Hence, sparing us some of the pain or the heartache that comes along with the actual experience. Now, some people will say, well, I learned the hard way, or I learned by doing, and yada, yada, which I'm one of those people. I'm a kinesthetic learner. I do learn by doing. However, after hearing situations and stories from people and not taking heed of their warning or not really listening to those lessons learned, I learned that, wow, I could have avoided this if I only were to have listened to that person. That's one of the biggest ways that stories can help us, by really showing us a better way and a different way to approach things. Now, stories can also hold us back or harm us. There's a fabulous quote by Marnie Gillard, and she says, "We need to look hard at the stories we create and wrestle with them, retell and retell them, and work with them like clay. It is in the retelling and returning that they give us their wisdom. Hearing these stories of hardship or despair, poor finances, relationships, all the things, they can keep us stuck in these stories." Think about how many times you've been told your stories by yourself, by other people. And I want you to think about, what is the purpose of telling the stories? Typically, it's to validate our experience and to give others insight and ourselves insight about what we've experienced. And feeling validated is huge. And having others recognize, wow, you went through that. That's huge, is another big thing because that allows us to feel seen. But one downside of that is when we tell our stories, we do risk others trying to invalidate our truth or to skew it for their own benefit. Now, the key to all of this is to return to the lessons that you've learned. Embrace the wisdom that is held within each story and recognize what still triggers us so that we can work to heal that and then move on. So I'm going to get a little woo-woo on you right now. Stories, when we retell them, we're breathing new life into them. That's one of the things that I talked about in the first episode about stories. But stories also thrive on the power of verbal vibrations. Think about back in the day, well, not back in the day, maybe like 10, 12, 15 years ago, they did a experiment, a science experiment where they wanted to crush an atom to see what was on the inside of it. And ultimately what they found was that there was just sound. Just sound. So this universe is made up of sound. Now, yes, there's particles and matter and atoms and all the things. But when it comes down to it, everything is created and made up of sound. They say that the sound of the universe is Om. So there is power in verbal vibrations in the form of words. Now, the universe doesn't know the difference between reality or fantasy. It only knows vibration. So when we tell the story to anybody, the universe feels that vibration and matches it, okay? This ties in with the law of increase, the law of attraction, which is that magnetic force that pulls things to us. I actually talk about this in detail in my book, The 1 Degree Shift. Now, the law of increase essentially is what we focus on grows, and we get more of that in our life. It becomes prominent in our lives. So if we want less of something, we need to stop focusing on that particular thing and start focusing on something else. But what happens when we've had trauma, and that's literally all consuming. So that tells us through the law of increase that we're just going to keep getting more trauma and more trauma and more trauma. There is a way out of that cycle. There is a way out of that pain and the heartache and the heartbreak and the trauma and all the things. Trust me, I have been here. I have been in that cycle and I've gotten out of it. And that's why I'm sharing this second podcast episode about stories. I can share with you how to rewrite those stories so that you can create and reframe your life from a place of empowerment so that you can get kicked out of that cycle. You can get kicked out of the cycle of drama and heartache and heartbreak and trauma and all that stuff, okay? So how do we rewrite our stories? And how do we rewrite our stories so that the new stories can empower us instead of disempower us? I've got a quote by Donald Davis, and Donald says, "The real difference between telling what happened and telling a story about what happened is that instead of being a victim of our past, we become master of it." So how do we tell stories? I shared this in the first episode. We remember the event, we feel the emotions, we marry those two things together to form a translation of that event. And that translation is also based on who we think might hear the story or read the story. And oftentimes we will censor our translation, and this is a safety mechanism. This is something humans do. But oftentimes we will censor things based on who we think might be listening. I want you to think about that. This is huge. When we censor, that is a way that we become disempowered because we are censoring. Because, well, I might hurt so-and-so's feeling by if they listen to this or if they read this or whatever. But for this purpose, for this exercise, I want you to find a way to write out your story to where it's private. So this could be an online journaling service. This could be a Google Doc that you password protect. This could be a journal that you hide or whatever. But give yourself permission to, when you create that translation, to recognize and to have the intention that no one but you will read what you have written down. That's the first step in how to rewrite your story. Is I want you to pick a story that you feel right now is the most prominent story that is impacting your life negatively. Okay? Now, positive, negative, it's how we choose to perceive it. There's been some really shitty things that have happened in my life, which at first could be perceived as really horrific and really bad things. But they ended up to be the best things that have happened because they completely changed the trajectory of my life. And without those shitty things happening, I don't know where I would be. I don't know where I would be. All I know is that those were a catalyst for me to be where I'm at right now. And often we feel like those shitty things, those traumatic things, those really bad things, it's like, oh my God, my life is over. There's no way that life can get better. Oh, this is really bad. Oh my God. And we start to go in that cycle. So recognize that, yes, there is that feeling of panic that can come in, and that usually does come in when we're rehashing our stories. But that's why we're here. We want to lean into these stories. We want to lean into this energy and let it speak to us. We want to lean in and say, I hear you and you're safe right now. Let's lean into this and really understand the wisdom that is held within this fear, within the sadness, within the trauma. Allow yourself to feel safe in the moment for you to be able to write out your story. Okay? So, number one, I want you to, again, pick an event or a story in your life that right now is negatively impacting your life, okay? I want you to remember the event and allow yourself to feel the emotions. If you feel like crying, go ahead and cry. Just cry it out. Try not to avoid the emotions that come up. I know that can be hard. But allow yourself to just be in that space. So feel the emotions. Now, some of you might be numbed out to those emotions. That is also a feeling. If you feel numb, just sit with that numbness. Notice where it settles in your body. And that's okay. Now, the next thing is marry those two together. So marry the emotions with the remembering of the event. So those thought patterns of the event. And then what's going to happen is when you put pen to paper or you put your hands to the keyboard, a translation will emerge. Allow yourself to write out or type out a translation of that story as you tell it. Okay? Now remember, try not to censor and just let it all hang out. Write out that translation and write it down as you normally tell it. And any other information that you feel is relevant right now in regards to your story. So some of you might be like, oh, I don't know how to do this. So pretend you have a trusted friend or advisor in front of you and they know, that they will not judge you. And that you can be 100% honest with them about the event, about the emotions that are coming up about the event, and you can just share everything. No holds barred. How would you tell that story? That's how I want you to write out your story. Okay? Then, once you're done writing out your story as you currently know it and tell it, then I want you to go back and read it. And now, if you want to take it like a 20-minute break in between writing it and then reading it, go for it. So, when you read it, I want you to notice what parts feel heavy to you and what parts of the story uplift you. What part of this story trips you up or triggers you? Allow yourself also to look at any limiting beliefs that come up while you're translating and reading your story. So, limiting beliefs typically are prevalent throughout stories of lack or tragedy or victimhood. So this could be, I'm not tall enough, I'm not rich enough, I don't have enough education, I don't have enough experience, I'm underqualified, overqualified, nobody takes me seriously, I've never been good at this, it's because of my gender, it's because I'm not a specific gender, it's because of my skin color, it's because of where I was raised, it's because of the religion that I grew up in, it's because of my diet, it's because of whatever, okay? Pay attention to those limiting beliefs. Now, these are all valid. They're valid. I'm not saying that these are not valid, but these beliefs can hold us back. So then the next thing is I want you to look at how, and just ask yourself, how can I diffuse these limiting beliefs and how can I reframe these triggers? So the first thing is to just identify the limiting belief. Is it really because of my lack of education? Is it really because of my amount of education, being overqualified for something? Is it because I am too fat or too skinny? Is it because I have brown hair? Is it because I have a missing tooth? Is it because I have a perfect smile? Is it because I don't have enough money? Is it because I have too much money? Is it because whatever? Identify that belief and then find ways that you support this belief. And I want you to write that in a sentence. So find ways that you support this belief and write it in a sentence. Let yourself be honest with yourself. We don't have to worry about being PC or whatever. PC is politically correct. This is your story and your story matters and your story is very freaking valid, okay? And allow yourself to be honest. So I have a couple quotes that I want to share with you here. The first one, again, is by Marnie Gillard. I shared this earlier, but it's worth repeating. We need to look hard at the stories we create and wrestle with them. Retell and retell them and work with them like clay. It is in the retelling and returning that they give us their wisdom. Carl Jung said, the most important question anyone can ask is, what myth am I living? What myth am I living? And the last one is by Salman Rushdie. I hope I am pronouncing that properly. Those who do not have the power over the story that dominates their lives, the power to retell it, rethink it, deconstruct it, joke about it, and change it as times change, truly are powerless because they cannot think new thoughts. I'm actually going to reread that again. This is from Salman, Salman, Rushdie, Rushdie. Those who do not have the power over the story that dominates their lives, the power to retell it, rethink it, deconstruct it, joke about it, and change it as times change, truly are powerless because they cannot think new thoughts. Write down your stories that need to be released, that are holding you back. Get them all out. Write them out. Burn them, shred them, bury them. Allow yourself to honor where you've come from. Then write your new story as if it's happening now. And ask yourself, how am I empowered by this? What have I learned about myself and others? What wisdom have I gained because of it? And once you create your new story, your story that when you tell it, you feel empowered. You feel like you're standing on top of the mountain saying, not, hey, let me look down on the world, but world, look at where I am at now. I have gone through the thick of it and I am still standing. I am still here. Woo! And share it with someone who will hold it sacred with you. It's huge. This is huge. There's a quote that I want to share with you here. I don't know who said it. I've seen it attributed to several different people, but it's become aware of what is in you. Announce it, pronounce it, produce it, and give birth to it. That is the beautiful byproduct of creating and manifesting your new story. Some of you may have a hard time rewriting your story. So if you feel that this might be an issue, what I want you to do is really think about, what kind of life do I want? What kind of life do I want? Be very specific about what you want. Some of you right now might be feeling a little bit maybe overwhelmed or a little frustrated because you're not quite sure how rewriting of your stories is really going to help you and how that's going to propel you forward. So one of the things that we talk about and look at and pick apart inside of the 1 Degree Shift Tribe is looking at what kind of life you want. I call this creating your dream life. Now, this is not this pie in the sky thing. This really is looking at what is perfect for you, not for your partner, not for your parents, not for your kids. Like, what is a perfect life for you? What kind of life do you want? And that is your goal. Like, I always tell my people, have a goal and then or your goal or your vision, and then have a vision beyond the vision. Because the thing is people will achieve a goal and then that's it. And they're like, well, shit, now what do I do? And so it's kind of lackluster. And then they go back to their old habits and old ways of being. And the thing is especially when we've been struggling with stories and struggling with finding our voice and struggling with people hearing us and seeing us for who we are, it makes it really challenging for us to even envision a future of empowerment. So I want you to think about, like, what kind of life do you want? What have you always wanted to do? What is your dream life? And I'm not talking the unrealistic, Hollywood version of your life. I'm talking about what really lights you up. Like when you sit in bed and you wish, like maybe you want to burn your life to the ground and start over, what would you do? What would you do? Who would you be? Who would you be surrounding yourself with? And I want you to have that in mind as you rewrite your stories of empowerment. Because the thing is that where you're at right now is, literally, your reality right now, what you have right now, is nothing more than your past thoughts and actions realized. And to change your life, you have to change the stories that you tell. You have to change the stories that you tell. In creating your new stories, part of that is asking yourself, okay, these stories are literally the roadmap that is leading me to where I'm going. Remember in the last episode, I talked about the stories of the two brothers and how they had an addict father and an abusive mother. And you asked them, why are you the way that you are? And one brother said, I'm happy and healthy and sober because my father was an addict and my mother was abusive. And you asked the other one, why are you the way that you are? And he said, I'm homeless, living on the streets, and an addict because my father was an addict and my mother was abusive. It's the energy that we hold. It's that inner dialogue. It's that translation, remember, of the thought and the emotion and the translation that we tell to people. And the main person is yourself. That translation that you tell yourself. And you could say, oh, come hell or high water, I am not going to end up where they're at. Or part of it could be, oh, wow, so my father is an addict, my mother is abusive, this is just my lot in life, this is just where I'm headed. And that is as far as your vision goes. So that's where you end up. It truly is your thoughts married with your emotion and that translation that you share with yourself and the world. So figure out what kind of life you want. Where are you going? Be very specific about what you want, and then write your stories from that place of empowerment of where you know you're going, where you know you're headed. If right now you're using and you want to be sober, what does your life look like when you're sober? What does it look like? What are you doing? Where are you working? Who do you hang out with? What does your home look like? Get really clear and specific. And then say, okay, so what story of empowerment am I going to tell my people, myself? How can I use my past as fuel to better me instead of make me bitter, instead of to keep me stuck? My stepmom had a very, let's just say, unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And often she wouldn't remember things that she had done the night before. She used to lock me in my room, and I would have to use my trash can as a toilet. I remember one time my father called me when I was in the service, and he said that my stepmom had burned my boxes that were in his office, and the next day asked him why the carpet was burnt. And he's like, you don't remember? And she said no, and she lit my boxes on fire and burned my stuff that I was storing at my father's place. She didn't remember. She didn't remember kicking me out. And I was filled with anger and hatred for so many years towards her and my father for not sticking up for me. But after doing this process, I was bitter. I was so bitter. But after doing this process, realizing I didn't like the energy, I didn't like feeling angry, I didn't like feeling bitter, I didn't like feeling all of that rage. So I rewrote my story. I'm like, how can I use this to better me? And I looked at it through a different lens. I looked at it from a place of that kind of outsider's point of view. And what I saw was someone who had gone through something, or maybe a series of somethings in her life that caused her to begin drinking to numb out. And that became a habit. And now she numbed out so much that she now lives her life that way. And with so much empathy, I think about her and I feel sadness for the time that she has missed with those who love her because of her actions and behavior as a result of her substance abuse. I feel sadness, like true sadness. I love her. I love her deeply, but I can't be in her realm because us together is toxic. It's toxic. So I love her from afar, and I feel deep sadness and empathy for her because, again, I'm assuming, and I don't know, I don't have communication with her anymore, but I'm assuming that a series of things or something happened in her life that caused her to begin to numb out, and she's continued it to this day. And I feel deep sadness and empathy for her. And this is the power of rewriting your story, of looking at those feelings that you're feeling, no matter how challenging or heart-wrenching or uncomfortable these feelings be and are for you. When you give yourself permission to actually feel that, your whole life changes, because then you can understand the wisdom. It's almost like, like those Kinder eggs where you crack them open and there's like a toy inside or whatever. That's what it's like, is when you feel these feelings, it's scary, it's hard. But once you crack through that, once you lean into it and stop trying to avoid feeling the feelings and you just feel them, all of a sudden, these aha moments surface. Now, one of the things that I often do is if I'm feeling sad, I'm like, I let myself cry and I'm cry. And I'm like, okay, why am I feeling sad? What is this sadness teaching me? What is it showing me? What is this? What are these tears impressing upon me? Like, what do I need to know? And I open myself up and get curious about the sadness. Or if I'm feeling angry, I get curious about the anger. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, I get curious about the overwhelm and I dig into it. Fuck no, it's not comfortable. It's hard sometimes and it's scary and it's very, very uncomfortable. But allowing me to get curious has allowed me freedom from those things because I don't sit here and avoid them for 15 years. I sit with it and get really uncomfortable for 10 to 20 to 30 minutes to a couple of hours. And all of a sudden these light bulb moments happen and I'm like, oh my goodness. And huge epiphanies. And you start to see the world differently. You start to see your story differently. And also you start to feel greater appreciation for yourself, for having the strength to come through everything that you have gone through. Everything. Think about this. Think about how much life you have gone through. Think about how many miles your feet have walked. Think of how many hands you have touched, like how many hugs you have given, how many hands you've shaken, how many faces you've gazed upon, how many conversations you've had. This is massive. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a series of stories. And our stories are these little stepping stones along our journey, along our path in this life. And some of these stones, these stories are rocky and shaky. And some of them collapse when we walk on them, which cause us to fall. Others are very solid, very flat. And we stand firm on them and we feel empowered because we know that is not going to let us down. They feel like they uplift us. So give yourself permission to recognize your stories. Recognize the ones that disempower you, that make you feel defeated, that make you feel less than, that make you feel like you have to shrink, and rewrite them. Lean into the emotion and feel it. Yeah, it's going to be scary as fuck. It's going to be super uncomfortable. But that's where the magic happens. That's where the wisdom is. That is where those aha moments lie. And allow yourself to own your feelings and own your truth. And allow yourself to rewrite your story from a place of empowerment. Now, if you notice, if you're paying attention, you notice that the two brothers' story is exactly the same. The end is exactly the same. I am happy, successful, and sober because my father was an addict and my mother was abusive. And the second brother, I'm homeless and an addict because my father was an addict and my mother was abusive. You could, at the end of the day, verbally share your story the same as you did before, but the energy that you hold, the vibration that is shared, and the conviction and the empowerment and the confidence and the courage that you hold when you are telling that story will be vastly different, and people will notice. Instead of seeing you as a victim, they're going to see you as the victor. They're going to see you as someone who has gone through the shit. But you have come out the other side empowered and stronger than ever before, and a hell of a lot more wise, because you were forged by fire. You are that phoenix who allowed yourself to burn your old life to the ground and come out victorious. I know you can do this. I know you can do this. This truly is a practice. And I know that you will be able to rewrite your stories and create a life you're excited about. This is the essence of my work. is to help you create a life you're excited about through the 1 degree shift. The 1 degree shift is all about literally just being willing to take one baby action, shift just 1 degree every single day. And that one baby shift could be just thinking about something differently than you have in the past. And like I said, when you tell that story, and it could sound like verbatim, it could sound exactly like the same story you've been telling. However, the energetic vibration, the translation of it, will hold the energy of empowerment, of courage, of conviction, of confidence. I am happy and successful because, boom, and you own that story. You own the wisdom held within it. You don't let it disempower you like you have in the past. We've all been there. We all have struggled, and our struggles all look different, but they're all valid, and they all teach us and show us who we are. So allow yourself over the next couple of weeks, over the next couple of months, to look at your story and those stories that are impacting your life the most, and give yourself permission to own your emotions, own those thoughts, own everything about the story, and ask yourself, how can I rewrite this from a place of empowerment, from a place of wisdom that comes from really feeling the emotions and allowing yourself to get curious about how can this make me better, not bitter? How can this story, how can these emotions, how can these thoughts, how can the outcome be a solid stepping stone in the story that I am writing that will bring me to the top of that mountain to show people what I have overcome, and that I am here and powerful and confident and courageous and very clear about where I'm going. Again, this truly is a practice. So allow yourself to get comfortable in getting curious about your emotions and about your feelings, and allow yourself to begin translating them in a way that feels more courageous and that feels more empowering. And when you rewrite your stories, you will have and you will create a life that you're excited about. I would absolutely love to help you rewrite your stories. This is one of the things that we're doing inside of the 1 Degree Shift Tribe. The link is in the show notes. It would be my honor to help you with this. I have seen this completely change people's lives. And if you're still here listening to the end of this episode, I know that you're ready. I know that you are ready for more. So click that link, join us. I love you. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode. If you're enjoying this content, which I hope you are, and you're applying this knowledge in your life and are seeing results, I would love to hear about your successes. Click the link in today's show notes, share your success story with me so you can help to inspire others. Also, if you've been loving these episodes, it would mean the world to me if you would rate this podcast on iTunes. A 5-star rating is what I always aim for. Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. All links mentioned are in today's show notes.